Welcome. Thank you. Welcome the audience. Welcome our dear guests and our dear online listeners. So, Jón, you are the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iceland, and you are known in the Baltics as the man thanks to whom Iceland was the first country to recognize the independent Baltic states in 1991. And later, just to give some information to the audience, you of course know it already, you later also served as Iceland's ambassador to the United States and Mexico, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Ukraine. And you have come here to celebrate your 85th birthday in Estonia. So your daughter contacted Aku and let us know you're coming. Why did you want to celebrate your 85th birthday in Estonia?
Well, I don't know. There was no certain celebration. Perhaps it was a plot by my daughter, yes. We have a phrase in Icelandic, tvisvar verður gamall maður barn, that translates twice a man becomes a child. And I was referring to my daughter, Kolfinna, who is here somewhere. She has now overtaken our lives, my life and her mother's. And I suppose it was her plot that it was suitable to celebrate 85 years in Tallinn. So I am innocent.
You say that you have often been asked that, like, where did you take the courage from to differ from the masses and all the Western leaders back in 1991? Did it take a lot of courage?
Courage, stubbornness, arrogance, positive, negative, yes. During my student days, I usually was of the opinion that I was better than my teacher. I, for instance, resigned from gymnasium because I felt that they were not giving any education. A school which taught 7 foreign languages and emphasized especially irregular verbs in a number of languages, but had nothing to say about society, no serious history, no serious mathematics, was not worthwhile. So I resigned, and I told my rector when he asked, "Why are you resigning?" "It's so boring here," I answered. And he said, "Well, if you discover that you made a failed decision, you are welcome back, my young man." But I didn't need to come back. It was not a failed decision. I started studying music. I bought a piano, spent 6 days exercising on the piano. 2 hours I played chess with only grandmasters, etc. So, in conclusion, I was of the opinion that this was a fundamentally correct decision to resign from schools to educate yourself.
Mm-hmm. So that same stubbornness, arrogance, decision-making also made you kind of take the stand against what you describe was a kind of conformity of silence, or at least, let's not irritate the Soviet Union back then, let's, keep peace.
Yeah, I served as foreign minister for 7 years. It was 88 to 95. This was exactly the most exciting time since the war. The world was in the process of fundamental change. The big guys were Bush Senior, Kohl, Chancellor, Mitterrand, the brilliant, intelligent Frenchman, and the Iron Lady. This was the clique that was the leaders of Western democracy. The man who started all this was not, they did not start the process of change of the world. That man was a Russian called Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev. He deserves credit because he thought that he could reform Soviet communism. He was obviously a bit naive. He was a lawyer by education. And it turned out that he promised glasnost, opening up, yes, started by talking about everything and letting loose all the discontent. And then he promised perestroika, systemic change. And that is where he failed. He never delivered on the promise. And gradually he lost the support of the democratic forces, and in the end he was a isolated man on the verge of losing political power. The Western leaders, on the other hand, made the mistake to put the stakes of the success or failure of their policies entirely on a single individual, this same Gorbachev. So, when your leaders came from the singing revolution and from the human chain, grassroots movements to restore democracy, independence first of all, and then democracy, when they came to seek support, they of course expected to be embraced. The leaders were always talking about values, Western values. They were talking about the values of democracy, expansion of democracy, the rule of law, etc., etc. So they thought that unquestionably the leaders of Western democracy, the leaders of NATO, would embrace them, support them. They went through a culture shock because it was far from so. This gang of four, the leaders, told them, look, there is a lot at stake here. We are engaged in overall negotiations with the good man Gorbachev on fundamental change. We are ending the Cold War. We are negotiating disarmament, conventional weapons, nuclear weapons. We are liberating Eastern Europe from under the hegemony of Soviet Russia. We are dealing with unification, peaceful unification of Germany, and United Germany's continued membership of NATO. So these are big issues. These are questions and issues about war or peace. Please take note that we cannot do anything, say anything which would undermine Gorbachev, because then all of this is at stake, all of this will be endangered, the peace dividend would go away, the hardliners would come back, and even we could even face a military conflict again in Eastern Europe. So they were told, keep quiet, shut up, in a more rude language, compromise, seek negotiations about more formal home rule. One of the foreign ministers asked me, can we not use the formula for the Åland Islands about some of those Baltic countries? One of them said to me, why are you always talking about the Baltic nations? Haven't they always belonged to Russia? Nota bene, the leaders of the West were all formerly colonial powers. The British were a colonial power. The French were a colonial power. United States has a Monroe Doctrine which states, keep away from Latin America, it's our backyard.
So, but that was the scene that you faced.
Yes, that was the scene.
Did you feel, were you like, I'm going to come to the present in a second as well, but you also just described the silence when you were the one who ditched your pre-written speech and said something different that the occasion called for. Yeah. So, and things started to roll. And so it took kind of one man, a few men, to actually change the course of history.
And circumstances. There were two out of the foreign ministers in the group of foreign ministers of NATO at the time. There were two persons who actually disagreed with this and criticized this. I never called this policy. This was an attitude, because this was typical of the leaders. They were reacting too late and with too little to what Gorbachev did. They did not have an initiative. The other foreign minister was the Danish one, Uffe Ellemann-Jensen, who was recently passed away, blessed be his soul. He was the other one who spoke up for on the Baltic issues within the EU, where I did not have any access. I did perhaps more so within NATO, where it mattered more, because it was obvious. The leaders of the West had made a mistake. It was not correct assessment of the domestic situation in Russia that Mikhail Gorbachev was the only leader of the democratic forces. He had lost the support of the democratic forces by 1992. He had increasingly had to rely on the hardliners himself. So it was in a way a bit absurd that we had been in a Cold War for 50 years. About what? About trying to liberate the captive nations was the common phrase, the captive nations. Now, the official policy as expressed by the President of the United States was to appeal, for instance, as he did in the speech to the Ukrainians, don't succumb to extreme nationalism, keep the Soviet Union together in the name of peace and stability. In other words, it was exactly the opposite of what we had been fighting for 50 years. They turned it all upside down. This was not realistic politics.
Well, but what saved us largely was that Soviet Union was much weaker than was commonly thought. Coming to present now, do you think that we overestimate Russia right now, or we rather underestimate, or what is more dangerous here? If I know that, you know, it's easier to say in hindsight, but if you would guess, are we right now also kind of, are we afraid of the, I don't know, boogie on the wall or paper dragon, or should it be more courageous?
As a young man, I had a dream to get on board the Siberian train one good day. Take a train from Beijing to Berlin. And when my wife had a big anniversary celebration, we actually did it. We went to China, boarded the train, spent 10 days on the train, watching this huge expanse of the Russian Empire out of the window. I was shocked. What I saw was an underdeveloped country. What I saw was mud roads, cars in disrepair, stuck somewhere in a mud, or houses in total disrepair, leaking obviously because the ladies had put some of their bedroom clothing on the top of the roof to keep it from leaking.
It's probably not that different today.
No, it's no different.
Yeah.
No, it's no different.
Yeah.
It is. There are 7 million people in the Siberian expanse east of the Urals. There are 1.4 billion Chinese at the other end of the border. It is inevitable law of demographics that Siberia will be populated by the Chinese in the next few decades. Russia is an underdeveloped country which now temporarily makes a lot of money out of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels have to be outlawed if we are going to live a bit longer on this planet. So that is not something which you can base your future on. This is an important issue because the biggest reserves of fossil fuel are to be found in Greenland and on the North Pole, and the melting of the ice in the North Pole and Greenland will in the next few decades change the world. The northern route for cargo traffic between the Pacific and the North Atlantic will be that way. And there is a danger that there will be a grab for these valuable resources in the north. We follow this because we are involved. We are one of the 8 countries in the Arctic, around the Arctic Circle, and we are members of the Arctic Council, which so far tried to solve imminent quarrels, conflicts peacefully. Putin's wars against his neighbors, first in Chechnya, then in Georgia, occupation of Ossetia and Abkhazia, occupation of eastern Ukraine, and now a full-scale war in Ukraine has totally destroyed the cooperative prospects in the north. Russia bases her strategic utilization of resources very much on this, what will happen there next 30 years. But it is an entire conflict, deadly conflict, with what humankind has to do, which is to stop fossil fuels altogether and go through the transition to clean energy, where we are experts, by the way. Russia is out of date. It's underdeveloped, it's out of date, and it should be taught to behave.
So you are saying in the long run they're bound to lose?
Yes, definitely.
What about in the short run, and what must we do here and now?
The Ukrainians have themselves to blame for many mistakes that they have made in the recent past. Make a comparison between what you did after 91 and what they did. You knew from experience that you had to go to the extremely difficult task of a transition from a police state, from colonial rulers, from centralized plan economy to market economy, to build democratic institutions, etc., etc. This is extremely difficult, and you succeeded in doing this. The Baltic states succeeded in this transition. Of course you made mistakes, of course we can criticize some parts of it, how you did it, etc. I'm a social democrat, you are more to the right, some of you at least. But the point is this: Ukraine declared independence at the same time as you did. You did what had to be done in managing this transition. You integrated into the inner market of the European Union and the international trading system. And you knew from experience that you had a fragile independence and you had to take out insurance. That is called NATO. NATO is the most successful defense organization in the world. It is based on single idea, collective security in the transatlantic area, saying whoever wants to attack us must face a response from all of us. Attack on one, it means attack on all. NATO was so successful as a deterrent that we didn't have to fire one shot. against an enemy, which was the Soviet Union, which was much, much more powerful than Russia is today. But it remains a fact that Russia, an underdeveloped country, has a nuclear deterrent, is a nuclear power. My colleague in the past, the Polish foreign minister Zirinovsky, missed it out of himself one day. He said, Russia is a Burkina Faso with nuclear weapons. And that is a horrible, truthful statement. Of course, he apologized for the rudeness, but it is the naked truth. Ukrainians did not do this.
So what is there left to do now, and also kind of from our side, like what are the critical steps?
Yeah, that's it. Tell you something which is not very well known, but should be known in this context. The president of Ukraine, who was one of the three who made the decision to disband the Soviet Union, was Leonid Kuchma. We met twice. I liked him. He was very sharp and very intelligent. In 2003, at the end of his reign, he asked me for a meeting. The reason why was this. As a foreign minister, I had been in charge of negotiations with the European Union on behalf of the EFTA countries about the so-called EEA. It took 4 years. It means that, well, the EEA means that we are fully integrated into the internal market of the European Union, and we are 2/3, to cut it short, we are 2/3 members, but we could not take the step for membership because this was before the fall of the Berlin Wall. And Finland was neutral, and Sweden was neutral, and Swiss is eternally neutral, and Austria was neutral. So they said we have to have an interim, temporary bridge. Delors, the greatest European commissioner, he was at that time preparing two things: the internal market and ultimately the European Economic Monetary Union. The European Union could not take new members, but these EFTA countries were economically strong, and he realized that the Indian market would be strengthened very much if we were with it from the beginning. Then the world changed, and some of them became full members, but there it is. The EEA is there. Why I am talking about this, it's because Kuchma, having set the course on taking Ukraine into the European Union first, realized that it would take too long. That because of internal politics, he had to get a speeded up process. He asked me, can Ukraine join the EEA? We spoke about it with his experts for 1.5 or 2 hours. Conclusion, yes, it can. It will speed membership for Ukraine for many years. This was realistic. The politics, of course, would have been difficult, but Kuchma, this was at the end of 2003, and it was at the end of his term. Those who took over after him forgot about this. Now I ask you, if Ukraine would have done this and become an associate member, 2/3 member of the European Union, would the man in the Kremlin, Putin, have dared to attack an EU member country? I'm not absolutely sure, but I dare to doubt that he would have done so. It would have changed a lot. One mistake it was a mistake not to try to implement this, just as the leaders of the Western world made enormous mistakes in not offering full-scale Marshall Plan to democratic forces in Russia after the dissolution of communism. It cost a lot of money. It would have been an enormously beneficial investment, but it was an opportunity lost. We lost it, opportunity, and we lost it again. Ukrainians have lost many opportunities because of the wrong politics, domestic politics in the past. Ukraine was a horribly corrupt society, as a matter of fact.
I have.
Forgive me for being so. My answer should be shorter.
I just hope that this window of opportunity still exists. I know, obviously, we've lost so many, and now it's getting more and more credit cut. But you know, there are still forces of evil, forces of good, and the good is, you know, kind of hesitating, and there are a lot of parallels to be drawn. So I guess in one sentence, the recipe for the right direction now is to support Ukraine in its fight, keep fighting, not give in, not force Ukraine for negotiations. Am I correct that you would sign this?
To stop supporting Ukraine, as there are some signs now, especially in the US Congress, is an awfully short-sighted mistake. One mistake after another. And for short-term internal domestic petty reasons, it's just part of the politics. We are facing an enormously dangerous year now. If this man called Donald Trump becomes President of the United States at the end of this year, and if he is the same man as was president 4 years before, and if he is the man who actually said that he encouraged the man in the Kremlin to attack member countries of NATO, which, according to him, owed him money. The man said this. It is, I don't know if I quote it exactly, but this is what he said. He encouraged an aggressor to continue because of his domestic fight for power in the United States. If he means this, and he said when he was president, NATO is obsolete, and he said that he would not stand by Article 5, namely to defend NATO, apply the power of NATO collectively if it is one country is attacked. This is approaching, this is coming. We must take this seriously. And now you are members of NATO, you are members of the EU, you sit at the table where the decisions are taken, and you will have to do what is necessary, which is to stop this from happening, which is to, if there is, if there are signs that Europe without America, without the transatlantic alliance, Europe is in a bad shape. It is no doubt, it has the resources, it has the riches, it can, of course, take care of its own defense and security. But it is not in shape, it is not doing it. It has now and then done something, and it is perhaps talking about it. But nonetheless, time is running out, and the fact is simply this. Europe, if this man stands by his words and withdraws from Europe, and NATO will become useless. Europe is on her own, but it is our Europe, it's your Europe, You are in control.
We'd better get in shape.
Huh?
We'd better get in shape.
Yes, that's it.
I have one question.
And if it has to be up against the leadership of the Western Alliance, remember, they've made series of mistakes. Don't trust them to be the in possession of ultimate wisdom. You know Russia better than they do. You have more experience of dealing with it. You know that imperial Russia is dangerous to her neighbors. You know how to deal with it. And you teach the leaders of the West lessons about how to deal with it.
I have one more question that I kind of like that ties into this. So who do you think are or will be the heroes of our time? As we discussed, so much hangs on one individual who dares to go against the tide. So who do you think are the heroes of our time?
Have you been to China?
No, never had that.
Think about it. Mao Zedong is venerated in China as the founder of re-establishment and the unity of the Middle Kingdom, which has 5,000 years history behind it. He was semi-mad, and what he did in terms of politics was that he left China when he finally died, even in worse shape and poorer than when he took power in 1949. His successor is called Deng Xiaoping. He came to power in 1978. He realized that the country was in a total mess. His solution was very simple. It was to open up, like Gorbachev promised to do, but it was also systemic change. And the difference between Peng and Gorbachev, who's also a great man, is that Deng Xiaoping followed up. He implemented what he was saying. He opened up special areas for foreign investment and transfer of technology into China. Cut it short, he accepted the fact that a market society under democratic control, keep that until later, he accepted the fact that a market society, if you want prosperity, like you want in your prosperity area, if you want prosperity, if you want production, if you want to create the wealth, you have to resort to markets where they are applicable. He did so, and the result is the greatest transformation of any country in the world history. Now they count it that he has lifted 800 million people from medieval poverty into relative prosperity. China is not as rich as Europe or America, but nonetheless it is in the right direction because it has looked upon the world as it is, realistic politics, and you said, well, who is the greatest political leader? Who has done more than for the world in his part of the world than this man? I think he has a claim to be almost a miracle man. Of course, I know that many of you will answer, yeah, but China is a dictatorship. Yes, China is a dictatorship. It has been for 5,000 years. China has one nightmare, and that is dissolution. That is that it will dissolve into regions and under the heading of warlords, like the humiliation it suffered from on behalf of the European colonial powers, British, French, etc., etc. Never again is this. We have to understand this. The world is not necessarily just to obey our own ideas and cliches. China may become a more democratic country, but it will take a long time. In the meantime, we have to deal with the rise of China, decline of Russia, decline of Europe in realistic terms. And we will have to admit ourselves that we cannot impose our will on the world. We have to pursue realistic politics.
Any questions from the audience to take one?
I read your book, which came out here in Estonia 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was a very good book, compilation of your different speeches, and I very much liked your kind of understanding the essence of social democratism, that we are, and what is, and kind of promoting the Nordic model, that where we have, let's say, free access to healthcare and education, and there's the social mobility. And Estonia, based on this same criteria, is actually a very social democratic state already today. How would you define, what's the next big thing, ideal for social democratism? Because my understanding also from your book is that actually Nordic countries and Estonia have already met this criteria of being ideal social democratic countries.
Yes, out of the major ideologies of the past 200 years, communism is a total failure on the ash heaps of history, in Trotsky's words. Extreme capitalism, uncontrolled, ended basically in the Great Depression between 1930 and 40. America was saved by Roosevelt's New Deal, which is basically social democratic rescue operation. Social democratic, what does it mean? It means we accept facts. And it's one of the major misunderstandings of contemporary politics is that markets, on the one hand, and the democratic states are poles apart. You have to choose a market society and then deregulate everything, privatize everything, and give it extreme loose freedom, or the other option is simply an overwhelming state which does not resort to markets. This is nonsense. Markets are extremely efficient procedure to create wealth, to allocate resources, to create economic growth. But they are entirely man-made, and they have three major faults. One, for the simple reason that financial income is more than economic growth, as Piketty has proven in his volumes. It is the danger of concentrating wealth in the hands of tiny elite and not to share the prosperity with others. That's one thing. Another thing is that they are prone to economic crisis, which would lead to utter paralysis if not for a rescue operation of the state. This we can prevent if there is a thriving democracy which says, okay, we accept the realism of markets for producing wealth, but we are aware of those faults, and we regulate, we create laws and regulations and have supervision to make sure that the wealth is spread for everyone. We take care of that. Unlike extreme market fundamentalism, to spread the wealth and to prevent crisis. We know that Western Germany was much better than Eastern Germany. We know that South Korea is a miracle society compared to North Korea. We know that Taiwan was a much more successful society than Maoist China. So, markets where they are applicable, but then how do we share the wealth? Free education, free healthcare, state ownership of and direction of the major resource, energy resources, because that is now a necessity, an existential necessity. The markets will not solve the climate crisis. The markets will not solve the market crisis. The state has to have a plan and follow it, this transition to clean and efficient energy. So, social democracy is markets under democratic control. If they are not under democratic control, they will end in plutocracy, like Russia now under Putin, which is a kleptocracy. It's a collection of thieves, and it will end in disaster. Social democracy is the most successful socio-economic society which has been implemented and tried, and it is highly successful, believe me.
From the perspective of younger generation. So my question is, what do you think about the resurgence of socialist and communist ideology in the Western world as of late? For example, in the US, a lot of younger people seem to idealize socialism and communism, which is quite frightening for me personally, coming from the background that I do. So how would you get through to them to show them that people are flawed and the perfect redistribution of wealth is not possible in this world in the sense that they envision, and that we cannot live in a perfect commune happily and dance around a bonfire every night, and that the world could actually work out in that manner?
My answer is very simple. There is no danger at all that America will convert to communism of any type through the means of a younger generation. Communism is dead. It's an ideology which is stone dead and buried. Socialism. What is social democracy? You know the candidate for the Democratic presidential election called Bernie Sanders? He is basically saying, telling Americans, look at the Nordic countries, look at the Nordic model, because what America is failing to do is to spread the wealth in a much more equal way. America is much more unequal, and it is much more class-ridden society than it should be. It needs public health care. It needs free schooling. That's not communism. That's absurd. That's nothing to do with communism. It is social democracy. Who were the greatest enemies of social democrats in the past? Communists and fascists. Thank you.